The majority of this video will be spoiler free. Towards the end I am going to go into some spoilers, but I will give you notice so you can close the video. Lone Echo launched way back in July 2017, but despite it being an early VR game, it still holds up today. Here's why. First, let's talk about the movement. This game takes place on a space station orbiting Saturn, so you're in a zero gravity environment. To move around, you grab and hold any solid wall, computer terminal or any part of the environment and then simply push yourself off. Because you're in 0G, you will then float in the direction you pushed and you won't stop until you either hit something or you can use your brakes, which you get later on in the game. You also have two thrusters in each wrist. You can then activate them by pressing a button on the controller. These will actually steer you in the direction your hand is pointing. You also get a heavy thruster on your back, which you activate by clicking the left thumbstick down. It takes a little time to get used to, but it feels incredibly intuitive, and for a lot of people it doesn't actually cause any motion sickness. When you combine all these things, so you're pushing yourself off, using your wrist thrusters in short bursts to make little adjustments to where you're going, it really feels fantastic, and despite the fact that you're in zero gravity, so you don't have boots on the ground, it's one of the most immersive ways to move in a VR game. Lone Echo was also one of the early games to really use physics in VR. Obviously the movement is part of that, which while your hand will go through objects and walls if you don't grip them, as long as you press the grip button your hands will hold onto them in a realistic way. There are objects floating in space. You can then grab them. If you bang them together, they actually collide. If you have an object in your hand, you can then push against your environment and it will push you back. There is also an advanced physics mode for those with high-end CPUs, which has much more active ragdolls. Don't forget this was in 2017, only a year after the Rift and Vive launched. The next thing I want to focus on is the way the developers, Ready at Dawn, really focused on hand interaction, not just with the world, but with how you activate and use certain tools on your body. I'm sure most have already noticed that you actually have a full body, including full arms. Again, remember this was 2017. Although the arms don't always match up perfectly, they really add to the immersion. To activate your scanner, you have to physically tap the top of your wrist. The scanner is used for various things like scanning for radiation or activating a panel. To activate your cutter, you tap the bottom of either wrist. This is used for cutting open panels to get access to levers and other things that I won't go into because of spoilers. You also have a headlamp which you can turn on and off by tapping the side of your head.
Am I pointing that somewhere else?
You have a built-in computer you can access to look at your objectives by swiping on your forearm. Ready at Dawn understood that the more you have to do with your hands rather than pressing a button, the more immersive it is. And as you go through the game, you start getting used to how you use everything. It becomes second nature to quickly tap your wrist, cut open a panel, turn on your scanner to scan an I/O port. You really feel a sense of presence and lose yourself in the game more than most VR titles. Let's talk about the graphics. This is a Oculus funded title made by an experienced developer of AAA flat games, and it really shows. They're actually using their own engine, so that it's not using Unreal or the Unity engine, and it's one of the best looking VR games available right now. The quality of the assets, the textures, the lighting, it's all AAA levels of detail and polish, with some really nice material effects like the brushed metal on the Fury transport ships, or the textured glass which reflects light as you move around in a really realistic way. When you first go out into space, the sense of scale of you being out there, looking at the space station, even to this day is a real wow moment. I will give one recommendation: go into the settings and turn the TAA off. If you super sample as high as your PC will allow, even if it means turning the settings down to medium. I actually ran at medium with TAA off, and the game looks incredible, and now everything looks sharp and clear with minimal shimmer, and you can really admire the detail put into the environments without even the blur you get from temporal anti-aliasing. Let's talk about Liv. Liv is your human companion, and you are a labour unit, a robotic helper there with the sole purpose to help Liv. But it gets lonely in space, and it seems she has gotten quite attached to you, naming you Jack, and she's treating you more than just a worker robot. Ready at Dawn did an amazing job in making Liv an integral part of the game, and she's really what makes Lone Echo what it is. You've got conversations with her, she reacts to your movements even when you get a little handsy.
Careful.
And it all helps to build a bond unlike any other VR game and most non-VR games. We're coming to the end now, so I do need to go into some spoilers. If you haven't played the game and you don't want anything spoiling, I recommend clicking off the video now. So let's talk about the story a little more and how what happens affects your relationship with your human companion. The game does start off a little slow with some laborious tutorials teaching you all the various game mechanics. There is an anomaly which appears causing damage to the space station, and then you work alongside Liv to one by one fix the issues. It's pretty simple stuff. Flip a switch, turn a dial. You then go into space to investigate the anomaly, but you need to fix more stuff so you can scan it. You go from place to place via the Fury transports, again doing some menial tasks while communicating with Liv, and I've got to admit that I was starting to get a little bored. Then you actually get a radio call. Liv is in trouble.
Jack, I need you. Find a Fury transport and get back here now.
The way Ready at Dawn handled all of this was masterful. You could have come from it from any angle, but it all felt completely seamless throughout the entire game. Swooping in on my Fury transporter, I could see Liv stuck on the side of the space station and other label units floating to her aid. You get your cutter out, you're frantically trying to cut her free, then the incident happened.
Shit!
Cutting tool back online.
Incoming,
Liv.
Jack! Cut the panel!
Olivia, everything is going to be fine.
Station hull compromised.
That wave's gonna hit us, Jack! Hurry!
Catastrophic.
That's it! You got it!
Captain Rose.
Shit! Shit! Come on!
I was hooked. I was alone, isolated. I needed to see what happened, and not having Liv in my ear or knowing what happened to her, I really started to realise how much her being there to guide me made the experience so much more. I genuinely wanted to find her again, and I played through the rest of the game night after night until I finished it. You also meet Apollo, an onboard AI, who then helps you find Liv, and the moment that you see Liv again, you really are glad to see her. The bond between you and Liv is really strong. I'll give you another little tip. On the sections where you have to squeeze through the biomass, take it slow. Only use your wrist thrusters in short bursts, and you need to have some patience. It'll be a lot less frustrating and it's going to take less time than if you try to rush through it and keep dying. The story itself is also very good, with the ship that jumps in and causes all the chaos being from 400 years in the future. It ends on a big cliffhanger, leaving you wanting to see what happens next. And this leads on to Lone Echo 2. While I really enjoyed Lone Echo, it was far from perfect. It does feel more like a walking or floating simulator, with most of the gameplay consisting of pulling levers and cutting panels. I really want to see more variety to the gameplay, which judging by what we've seen from Lone Echo 2, it seems that they're going with a bit more puzzle solving. I hope we see some combat sections. They've already got the guns from Echo Combat, so having those in the game will again add more variety. I also want a longer game. It took me around 5 hours to finish the first one, and from what I've read, the new one will be about 8 to 10 hours, which will feel much better. And that's the end of the video. Hopefully people will find this interesting, and if you didn't, I'm sure you're going to let me know in the comments.
First.
Right. Considering the power outage, let's also calibrate your entry light.